communities. I'd like to invite Councillor Rachel Blake.
Thank you very much. I'll get the clicker and see if it works. Well, thank you very much, Reverend Dolly, for organising this. When we had a conversation, wherever she is, about 6 months ago, and she talked about BME United, it was something that really resonated with me, because I think it is so important that as BME people, we are united. And I think it's been great today that a lot of the speakers are from different backgrounds, but we have an awful lot in common, and we have more in common than we don't. So I think that's so important. What I will talk about is what my role is within adult social care and the portfolio holder. I'll also, like the other speakers, talk a little bit about my career and how I got here. And also talk about some things that I have learned along the way, one of which is never appear on a stage with amazing speakers that are pastors or reverends or toastmasters, and in particular never go last because you look absolutely dreadful. So that's my apology in advance, and obviously they're now cutting me off, it's so bad. It's like being in planning. What I would say as well is I really would like to welcome our guests that aren't from Doncaster. There are wonderful things happening here. I'm not from Doncaster either. I've only been here 10 years, and I moved here because I was homeless, for want of a better word, and we needed to live somewhere near where my son's school was. But there are some great things happening in Doncaster, and what I will talk about is promoting diversity and inclusion. And when I talk about promoting diversity, I mean all those characteristics that all colleagues have talked about. And I'd just like to start off a little bit by going off script and talking about the wonderful things that are happening in Doncaster in terms of women, and in particular, the point that Hannah made about supporting women and girls in schools. So we're in, I think, a really unique position in Doncaster, and a couple of my councillor colleagues, one of whom used to be the youngest councillor, but has now been, we now have somebody that was even younger than her when she was elected. We're having a discussion about how when you look across Doncaster, we have women in very senior positions. So we had, up till recently, a female chief exec and a female elected mayor, which was unique, I believe, across the country. Then when we look across our health partners, business, voluntary sector, we also have a number of women that are leading those organisations. We have a number of women that are chairs of organisations. And the two of us said, well, what can we do that actually enables us to encourage younger women to achieve their potential? We're not all going to make lots of money and do lots of wonderful things in the world, but I'm really passionate about everybody achieves their potential in life. So we're in the very early stages because we're all busy women, but looking at setting up a mentoring scheme for particularly for girls and students in Doncaster, and there'll be a number of people in the room that I'll be coming to see if you want to get involved in that, because I think we're in such an important place. We need to celebrate that, and we need to encourage more girls, young women to really have huge aspirations and look at people and think, well, I can do that, and I'm going to do that. So that's something that's going to come. So I'll start by talking about a little bit about myself, which I actually don't really like doing, so we'll whisk through it very quickly. So I'll talk about how I got here, I'll talk about my priorities, and I'll talk about, really importantly, for people in Doncaster, how you can be involved in my agenda, which is all about health and social care. And it was brilliant, I was just saying to Councillor Bright, to hear what she was saying in terms of their approach, because that's very much the approach that we're taking in Doncaster. Our door is open. We want to work with everybody. We've had 50% funding cut in Doncaster, as Glyn has already said. So the way we work has got to be different. I personally think it's a better way to work. I'd like to work that way, but I'd also like the money. But we all can't get political, so I'll stop there. But the door is open is what I'm saying, and that is what I want to talk about. So, how did I get here? For people at the back, you don't have to look at the embarrassing haircut that I have. But my defence is this was 1970s Cleethorpes. If products had been invented, they hadn't got on the train to Cleethorpes yet. So that's my dad, who sadly died prematurely at 69. That's my mum, and that's me and my brother. My dad, and I forgot to say actually at the start that it is Windrush Day, and I think we need to celebrate all those people that have made such a difference in our communities. I imagine some of whom are in the room today, so thank you. My dad didn't come on the Windrush, so I can't say that, but he was very like a lot of other people who grew up in Jamaica, is that he saw England as his mother country. So in 1944, when we were still at war, and the call went out to people in the Commonwealth and other countries, please come and fight for your mother country, my dad was first in line. So much so he actually lied about his age, and he was actually much younger when he came over than he should have been. And we only knew that when the RAF wrote to us to tell us about his pension. And actually he couldn't claim it because he was not as old as they thought he was. But never mind, that shows how keen he was. And that really is where the normality, I suppose, or what you'd expect from that family, really quite changed. So a lot of people and a lot of his friends all moved to places like Bradford and Sheffield and London and Manchester, but my dad was stationed in a little tiny place that if anybody's heard of, I will borrow this banana and give it to them, because I'll be very surprised. A little place called Bimbrook in Lincolnshire. No, I don't have to give away my banana, that's great. It's a tiny little place in Lincolnshire, and it was a huge RAF camp. And that's where my dad was stationed last. And because it was Lincolnshire and he wasn't demobbed until 1951, all his friends were white British and from Cleethorpes and Grimsby. And they said, come and live in Cleethorpes and Grimsby, which he did, which was fabulous. He liked the sea. I'm sure some people have been to Cleethorpes. Anybody been? Yeah? And it's a lie that he wanted to live by the sea, because you obviously never see the sea, because it never comes in. It's probably come in about 10 years in the 53 years that I've been going back there. Anyway, back to the story. So my dad was demobbed in 51. He stayed in Grimsby, worked on the fish docks. I think he was the only black person working on the fish docks, and we were the only family living in Cleethorpes and Grimsby. And I think it picks up on what some of our previous speakers said, is that you can choose your attitude at that point. So I could have concentrated on the negative, because there was a tiny minority of people who had a problem with us as a family, but the 99% of people were actually really nice and probably didn't like me because I beat them at running, not something else. So that was where I decided to focus at a very early stage. My brother and my mum still live in Grimsby, which is great, and Cleethorpes. My brother, again, is a bit unusual in terms of promoting diversity. He's a primary school teacher. We don't have many male primary school teachers, and we have even fewer primary school male teachers who are from an ethnic minority community. And he works in a particularly difficult school in Cleethorpes and Grimsby, and is their music coordinator and absolutely loves it. Anyway, moving on. So in terms of my career, I wish I had listened to the Reverend before I started my career, because I may not have made as many mistakes as our inspirational speaker said we should. So I haven't planned a career, I didn't particularly have a vision, I've almost wandered around, but one thing I've always been is very happy in what I've done. And I think sometimes you just very much have to go with your gut instinct in life and decide what you want to do. Anyway, so family was great, but unfortunately, and there might be people in the room like it, whilst my father was very much into education, and my mother was, but only for my brother. And it was assumed that being a girl, that I was either going to be a nurse or a secretary. Nothing wrong with either of those, but I desperately wanted to be a barrister. But it never happened, but I might do my master's degree when I retire. Anyway. So, university was out of the question, so I knew I wanted to leave Cleethorpes, and I wanted to go and live in London for nothing else other than I wanted to be near Covent Garden, because they seem to have really good shops. And I think that's probably how fickle I might have been through my whole career. So I got accepted at Westminster Hospital, where I started my career. I remember on my first week, the tutor said to me that we don't normally have people like you on this course, because I was on the Registered General Nurse course. And at that point, most people think it's about ethnicity. It wasn't at all. It was because I was Northern and I'd been to a comprehensive school, and I didn't have a family that were in nursing or a doctor or something like that. So I said, well, I hope I'm the first and there's going to be lots more of me. And luckily there was, and I like to think that's one way of promoting inclusion. So there are all the jobs that I've done. They've all been very different. I've done 11 other jobs as well. I currently, unlike Councillor Bright, don't work full-time. That's the difference perhaps between being cabinet members in Doncaster and in London. And when Ros asked me to be the cabinet member, I said I was happy to do that, but I actually did a full-time job as well. And I think, you know, so in terms of promoting diversity and inclusion, there are so many ways that it can be done. And what I would say is that you should challenge if people think you can't do it because of your circumstances. And I was just sharing with Councillor Bright a story about a colleague who had just become a single parent, who apologised for not attending a meeting at 4 o'clock. And my reply was, never apologise, just say that you're going home at 4 o'clock because you have to, and that's all you need to say. And I think, you know, if we all had that approach and challenged the norm, then we would have a more diverse and inclusive society. So, the other thing I just wanted to talk about is that there are a number of ways to get to where you want to go to. And a degree wasn't an option. I did do a degree part-time in the evenings, but that was after I qualified as a nurse and was working full-time. I did actually start a master's degree, but unfortunately when my dad died, my mum needed a lot of support, so that had to stop as well. It was part-time. But I put this up to say to people there are a number of ways to get to where you want to go in terms of your experience. So they're a bit varied. I've been a counsellor now since 2015. Unlike other colleagues, I've not been doing this years. I got here, I often think, by accident. And the reason I became a counsellor was I've always been political since I was about 13. My friends still laugh and say, we were all talking about Dallas and you were talking about Panorama. So I've always been a bit like that, so to speak. But the reason I became a counsellor is that we didn't have enough women, sadly, that were standing on the panel. And my son had done his work experience with our MP. I got involved, being a single parent, I had to take him to meetings because he was only 14. And one of those people, like probably every other speaker, is the person that puts the hand up and says, okay, I'll do it. And then I got involved. We didn't have enough women, so I put myself forward. I didn't expect to get elected for two reasons. I was standing in a ward that was next to my community, and doesn't tend to elect people that are not from that community. And where I live is somewhere that's never had somebody of my party for about 20 years being a councillor. So I didn't think it was going to happen. I got the most votes and I was elected in 2015. So there are possibilities. Perhaps it might not be what you've always wanted to do, but you might get asked to do it. And there's just a few other jobs that have given me incredible experience. The speaker earlier talked about getting board level experience. There are a number of ways to get that. And yes, it may be about who you know, but for a lot of these, it's a very open process. And you'd be surprised that, so for instance, I was a non-executive director, of a hospital trust in northern Lincolnshire and Gaul. You'd think they had hundreds of applicants. They probably had about 10 applicants, and I got accepted onto that. I became chair of the Council for Voluntary Service when I lived in Wigan. When we talk about numbers, the population there was 0.01%. I always have to get it right, from a BME community, and I became chair of the CVS because people just wanted ability and somebody that could do it. That then led me on to sitting on the board in Wigan, and again you make all those connections and you start to be able to put board level experience on your career. There are some other interesting ones. When I was in London, I was a tutor of a Saturday school, which was great. And then I've also been the manager of the under-9s football team in Broughton, because none of the dads would do it, and I'm sadly that person that puts the hand up, so I ran it. I do know something about football, and I do know the offside rule, so it wasn't too difficult, but I was happy to do it. And I also was the welfare officer for the table tennis. So there are lots of different ways to get involved, and they all give you different experience. So I won't repeat the same thing because everybody said it. You've got to believe in yourself. I didn't particularly have any support growing up to think that I could achieve anything, but if you don't believe in yourself, you'll never get there. My second point is there is more than one way. Perhaps you want to go to university, perhaps you want to do your master's degree or a postgraduate certificate. If that's stopped, you're not able to do that because of money or time or circumstance, there are lots of other ways to get that experience that you need. As I said, I've never really had a plan. I've zigzagged all over. I've gone with the gut. All I've really wanted to do is make a difference. But the other thing is, as I've put there, and there obviously is a theme about dancing, the big motto in my hat is it's not about waiting for the storm to clear, it's about learning to dance in the rain. So lots of things have happened to many of us, but we just have to start dancing in the rain because it's never the right time. I would say as well, try different things and meet different people. I didn't put all of my volunteer experience up there, but some of them have exposed me for people that think totally different to what I do. And at first you think, why would you put yourself through that? Because it then allows you to operate when you meet that type of person again. It stops you having imposter syndrome. It makes you realise that actually I can mix with anybody. And it's that attitude. I was chatting to a friend recently, and she said that you and I we were talking to each other, didn't really fit anywhere. And I said, well, I actually prefer to turn that around and say that I fit everywhere, we just don't fit in one place. And use that as an opportunity if you're thinking that's you. And the other thing I would say is that I have moved about a lot. I started off in Cleethorpes, trying to see the sea. I then moved to London. I then went to the northwest. I then moved to North Links, and now I'm in Doncaster. The one thing that was common with all of those is I got involved in my community, even if it was just an hour volunteering at the library, because it's a great way to get to know people. And then people start to accept you and get interested in you and want to find out about you as a person. So do get involved. I imagine in this room there are people that have finance skills, governance skills, able to chair meeting skills. Just in my ward alone, I have numerous groups that are crying out for somebody with your motivation, experience. And as previous speakers have said, you might not get paid anything financially, but the rewards you get are going to be absolutely huge. And it will lead on to something else. So, and again, in the council, we have somebody that's working with the voluntary and community sector, so we can get those contacts to people if they want to do it.